Over here. So I want to give a disclaimer that knowing that our topic today was on refugee crisis, I went out and looked for stuff, and I found this poem that really hit me. But it's a pretty brutal poem, so I just want to give that caveat because I don't want to offend anybody. But I thought it was also very realistic and a moving poem on our today's topic. Sorry. So it's called Home by a poet named Warsan Shire. And as I said, it's hard for me to get organized. She is a relatively young poet from Somali who wound up being a refugee in Kenya and then going to the UK. And she now lives in Los Angeles. And the name of this poem is Home in most sources. There's another source that has a longer name, which unfortunately I didn't capture. But here we go. No one leaves home unless home is the mouth of a shark. You only run for the border when you see the whole city running as well. Your neighbors running faster than you, breath bloody in their throats. The boy you went to school with, who kissed you dizzy behind the old tin factory, is holding a gun bigger than his body. You only live home when home will let you stay. No one leaves home unless home chases you, fire under feet, hot blood in your belly. It's not something you ever thought of doing until the blade burnt threats into your neck. And even then you carried the anthem under your breath, only tearing up your passport in an airport toilet, sobbing as each mouthful of paper made it clear that you wouldn't be going back. You have to understand that no one puts their children in a boat unless the water is safer than the land. No one burns their palms under trains, beneath carriages. No one spends days and nights in the stomach of a truck feeding on newspaper unless the miles traveled means something more than journey. No one crawls under fences. No one wants to be beaten, pitied. No one chooses refugee camps or strip searches where your body is left aching, or prison, because prison is safer than a city of fire. And one prison guard in the night is better than a truckload of men who look like your father. No one could take it. No one could stomach it. No one's skin would be tough enough. The go home blacks, refugees, dirty immigrants, asylum seekers, sucking our country dry, niggers with their hands out. They smell strange, savage, messed up their country, and now they want to mess up ours. How do the words, the dirty looks roll off your backs? Maybe because the blow is softer than a limb torn off, or the words are more tender than 14 men between your legs, or the insults are easier to swallow than rubble, than bone, than your child body in pieces. I want to go home, but home is the mouth of a shark. Home is the barrel of the gun, and no one would leave home unless home chased you to the shore, unless home told you to quicken your legs, leave your clothes behind, crawl through the desert, wade through the oceans, drown, save, be hunger, beg, forget pride. Your survival is more important. No one leaves home until home is a sweaty voice in your ear saying, leave, run away from me now. I don't know what I've become, but I know that anywhere is safer than here.
Thank you, Dorothy, for finding that poem. It's as brutal as it is. It doesn't match what we've been seeing on television and all the events of this time. Now I'm going to ask Amy to come up, who will introduce our speaker for the day. We'll have questions and answers after the talk. Oh.
Thank you, Jan. Today, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Hannah Gross. I think I said, I didn't ask you how to pronounce it.
It's perfect.
She is originally from Poland. She is we have a mutual friend, Ava Blas, who has visited with us a couple of times. Dr. Gross came to the US during a period of martial law in Poland in 1984. And she received some NIH grant money to study and advance her degrees from the University of Missouri.
Yep.
in Columbia, Missouri, not Kansas City.
There are three campuses, in fact. One is Rolla, Columbia, and St. Louis.
Yes, and I went to the St. Louis campus for a while. So she left during a period of martial law, which we know as the Solidarity Movement in the 80s. And she has an MS in physics and biophysics with and a PhD in chemistry with an emphasis in biochemistry. So she follows the history of scientific study and inquiry in Poland, which I identify with Marie Curie. So after several years in the world, including teaching at the North Carolina State University, she now has a consulting firm in Raleigh, NMR Service LLC, and she will speak to us today about her brother's experience in Poland with Ukrainian refugees and some other more general information about that situation. Please join me in welcoming Hannah Gross.
I have this one. Well, Amy, thank you very much for the very nice introduction. And I hope I will tell you some information which you don't know, because I know everybody's really glued their faces to the computers and also TV. And as my daughter said, Mommy, don't talk about history, just tell firsthand experience which you have with all those refugees. So yes, shame on the Putin, but again, I'll say something very personal. I'm not politician, and I have not been really politically oriented being born in Poland in 1950s, because being politically oriented, you would have to be the part of the ruling party. So my parents were always, no, please, be scientists, do science, do whatever you want to do. My mom even said never. She was a lawyer, and in fact, she was a judge in the beginning. And in 1956, she lost the job, and she didn't work for a year. And I hate that, because for the whole year and I was 6 years old, and she was teaching me how to read and write, to go to school early. And I was like, I couldn't hate my mom, but I hate the system already being 6 years old, because I couldn't run with the boys outside. I have to sit and write this, whole terrible words and so forth, a long one. So anyway, politics is not my specialty, but when looking, and we are all saying shame on the Putin, but what about all those world diplomats? What are they doing? I think they didn't do their homework. They didn't do their homework for more than probably 6 years. Well, you see, I don't know, the Myra changed that, and it's changing back. I don't know what it's doing, but anyway, the information here is something you know. In 2014, Russia took over Crimea, and what happened is 6 years, 7 years, now it's 8 years. and the world politician and all the big money businesses are just looking at it. So I think they were badly defeated by Putin, because there was time to do the diplomacy, the time to talk. She already, I think everybody knows what the Russia always tries to do, and particularly since year 2004, when really part of the Poland, it's in the yellow, was admitted to the NATO. It was 2004, and suddenly it was hard line between the NATO countries and also, in fact, 2004, the yellow countries were admitted, sorry, to EU, and Poland was admitted to NATO in 1999. So AU, so that's Estonia, Lithuania, and Poland, and all those countries in the yellow were suddenly enemy of Russia. And I don't know, being the politician, you should really realize that you should leave yourself the, well, I don't know, the pocket or something, whatever you call, that you can have the way back up. So now you have to put all those sanctions because you didn't leave yourself the margin. So that's kind of my 2 words about it. So what happened now, we have the refugee, they're not in that terrible situation like in the poem it was just said, read by Dorothy, but they're still leaving their houses and they have to come to the neighboring places, and those neighboring places, Ukraine, I don't know if that works, so well, works, but not that well. So Ukraine is here, and then we have Poland, which has the longest border. We have almost 331 kilometers, and then you have Slovaks, and then Hungary, and Romania, and Moldavia. So most of the people are ending in this country, but you see the highest toll, it's really on the Poland, because most of the places are in Poland. So when you look in the first day, which was the February 24th, it was only 30,000. On the third day, it was already 200,000. But what happened on the 5th day of war, it was almost 500,000 people who suddenly flowed to the country. You have only 8 places where those people can come. So that's my poem. And so when are you a refugee? Well, you're a refugee when you just leave your place and you have to really look for another house. That's the thing. So the people are living with the closest men's outside in Ukraine, because men's age 18 and 60 cannot leave the country. So only children. And so who is taking toll in Poland as mostly works or volunteer or it's kind of the social civic support and the movement. That movement is incredible. Up to now, it's a really social movement. Government is helping, but still a lot of that help are promises, because they're telling that each refugee, we're going to talk about in a minute, are going to get how much? 40, so $10 a day. So that would be $300 per month. So the people who are helping refugee should get that much money. But as far as I know, my brother didn't get a penny yet. So it's coming, but we don't know when, because, well, we don't know what's going to happen with the war either. So here we go. Who are the refugees? Well, mostly the women. So those are the brave women who has children and they have nothing to lose. So they're living, and most of them are professional middle. So they're nurses, they're teachers, they're accountants, they're all the human resources workers. They're very skillful, they are very professional, and they're doctors as well. So the Poland, who lost a lot of doctors recently and nurses who, because of the open borders in European Union, they were going before to England, and they were going to Germany, because still Poland is not on the euro, although we are in the European Union, but we still don't have the euro. So those pay in euros in Netherlands and all other places are really making more money. So they're coming back. So yeah, so also what was interesting to me, that there's a lot of students, and obviously I know that they are there, but it's like 80,000 students, because the Ukraine, like Poland, has a lot of international students. They're coming from China, they're coming from India, they're coming from mostly Asian country, but they're coming also from Kazakhstan, from all over, the Syrian as well. So those who were displaced before. So those has to go somewhere. And as I talked to my friends in Poznań, because originally I was from Warsaw, but then after graduating for just be adventurous, I moved to Poznań. It wasn't that time in 1974 very popular in Poland, but I never regret. I met my husband there, and I have a great friends, and I'm coming now every year to Poznań, because I was up to pandemic, I was running study abroad program in Poland for students from NC State, but we also have students coming from Chapel Hill, and it was in the field of biotechnology and kind of pre-medical stuff. So they were very interested. Too bad it's now on hold because of pandemics, and now because of the war, because we don't want the students to go there. So anyway, I said, yes, the universities are admitting the students from Ukraine. So all they have to bring is to bring their academic notebook and well, something. But anyway, there is a big program in Warsaw. There's a very big program in Poznań, and probably one of the biggest in Wrocław. And we're going to talk, and I'll introduce my friend later, who originally is from Warsaw and came from the Ukraine being a small baby. So yeah, so because there is a special connection between Wrocław and Lwów. How do you pronounce Lwów? Lviv, yeah, from Lviv. Lviv. Lvov, yeah. Well, I would say Lvov, and it's hard for me to think about it like Lviv, but yes. Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, it was interesting when reading some of the stuff for the talk. I just noticed that there is 60% similarity between Russian and Ukrainian, and that I thought, wow, that's the reason I understand, because the Russian was mandatory language for us before 1989, and then thing in school, so finished. So you have a lot of our years of the reading. So anyway, the important part is to talk about first one. How are the refugees getting to their destination point? Yes, they're leaving. So they're leaving their country. A lot of them are leaving on the trains, going from either Kiev or because when you go and look in Poland, so there are two big cities, Przemyśl and then the Lublin. So there are two big highways, and then the train runs. This is the train which runs all the way from the Szczecin, and the longest train in Poland. But that train runs all the way to Lwów now. So the people are coming from Przemyśl, and that's the biggest voluntary camp where the people are really giving the advice, service, and all the support and help for those people. There are also 8 border crossing points along the line. That doesn't really work very well. Along the line here, the border is here, so it's 8 crossing points. So the people are crossing on the foot, and the people are crossing in the cars. So those in the cars, very often they have the family, or they have the other people working in Ukraine. Because for the last 10 years, I think there was still a lot of Ukrainian working in Poland. They were coming, they were taking care of the older people. There were nurses. They didn't have the work permit, but they can get the temporary permit. Now, every Ukrainian who crosses the border and have a stamp that they cross can get the social security number, and they can get the work permit, and they can work in Poland. And also children are eligible to go to schools, but that's still not that easy to kind of distribute everybody, plus find the teachers who will speak Ukrainian and teach them. So that's a real problem. So yes, so here we go to the places to stay. So a lot, as I said, is a lot of the people are staying in the private residence. Of course, those who I talk about crossing by car, but also by foot. So there are people who walk for a week to really cross the border with the children. And in the time in the beginning of the war, it was cold. And in fact, yesterday it was snowing in Poland. So there is still cold. So, well, if it's snowing in Poland, then obviously it's snowing in the Ukraine, because up to Vistula River, we are the continental climate in Poland. So if it's cold in Moscow, it's cold in Warsaw. That's what we always say. So that's the reason I really like the Poznan, because when I was living in Poznan in the morning, it would be cold in Poznan, in Warsaw, but in Poznan it was like 10-degree warmer. So it's more like the Mediterranean climate on the other side, not exactly, but maybe. So anyway, that's where the biggest problem starts, the problem how to put the people in the places where they can end up. So there's a lot of temporary shelters. So those working as voluntary workers and all those 8 crossing points, that's a kind of nightmare for them. They really have to work very hard to distribute all that crowd. So a lot of people just want to go to Warsaw because it's capital. A lot wants to go to Lviv because they still have some people living there. But the other place are the hotels. So the people are giving their hotels for temporary shelter. The hospitals, if they have then extra rooms, they're giving those rooms. There are also church facility, which now in the middle, I think after 2 weeks, the church facility decided to also provide some of the shelters as well. They were very reluctant in the beginning, and well, that's a really hard politics. I don't want to get into it, but so and what I will tell you, I just thought to put those numbers. That's what my daughter said. No, mom. But the Ukraine is the second biggest country in Europe. So when you look, Russia has 144 million, but Ukraine has almost 45 million people. And if you go look here, we are. What happened? Next, please go. So when you look at the area and compared to North Carolina, so North Carolina is like, Poland is like half of North Carolina. So North Carolina, 53,000 square feet, almost 54. And then the Poland 120, but Ukraine is 222. It is a huge country. Of course, the biggest is in Europe is Russia, but then ends up on the Ural Mountains. And then the second is Ukraine. And one of the reasons, I know you know that map, but the reason I like it, because you always look where the Kiev is. And the Kiev is here. So all that is a great place where you can really culture all kinds of the stuff. So that has always been known as the Garden of Europe. It's a Garden of Europe because you have the sunflowers, you get sugar beets, you have cotton flax, all kinds of the hemp would be a good thing now. Yeah, and the hoops and tobacco and all that stuff. And of course, going down to the Crimea, you can also have the citruses and because of the really warm climate. Yeah. Yeah, and that's pretty much where that flags come from, that blue and yellow, because that's what you have, the blue and yellow. That's well, the Poland is very similar. So for those people crossing and coming to Poland, I think now it's going to be spring. So they're going to really enjoy, because we also have the yellow fields of the canola oil, the plants, and so we have the rye, wheat, barley. It looks a little bit different, but still blue and yellow. So well, that's in the end of July. Looks this way, blue and yellow. But we also have a corn nowadays and the maize. So here we are going to, and that's a quote my brother wife. So that's their farm. So in fact, that farm was in a family, but that's complicated how that happened. Of course, only part of it is in my brother's hands, and I inherited it. And despite that I have a physics degree, I have to get diploma in agriculture. Well, it didn't have to be 5 years, but I have to go for whole year to have that diploma, because when my grandfather died, I would not be able to inherit it as the will was saying, because I didn't have a papers. So I got that paper, and it wasn't still enough, because I was stupid enough. When the judge asked me, say, well, so he looked at this diploma. I said, oh yeah, well, so you are graduated from agriculture department. I said, no, I graduated from university, from physics. I said, oh, then you're not gonna inherit it. So we're gonna ask now the country to be another site in this case. And it was complicated. Eventually I did inherit it, and but when I left for United States, I gave it to my brother, and he really it wasn't in a very good shape. But what he did, he built something which he's now using for agrotourists, and also they have the theater there. He was, by his profession is a journalist, and well, has all those people in the theater. So he decided if he brings to the village the theater, that maybe he can get some money from European Union and something. And well, they got some money. They really invested it nicely, and it's the 30-acre farm, and for example has a beautiful ponds. And my brother is a visionary, and I'll tell you one more time what he wants to do also. So it was a small pond. He said, no, let's build the big one. And I'm like, no, please don't do it. Well, I come now and I think I really like it and enjoy it. So he is, yeah, so it's in the rustic style, all the rooms are. And so they have the facility to really house all those people who are living. So here it is, the boy who came with the first group of the refugees. And here's a story. So in fact, when they came, the ponds were still frozen. So the boys were playing, cutting the ice to get the boats out, and as the 14 years old boys, and it turns that those boys are karate champions. So what happened? So where we are now with the 73 refugee in his place. 30 of them are children, and the rest are the mothers. So 30, so we are like 43 mothers or something. So how did they came? They really came from those from the border, because my brother daughter and his boyfriend and also his son, they were all going by car, sometimes in 2 or 3 cars, and bringing the people. They're asking them, they're not going to Przemyśl, to those places where people are on the train stations, where really volunteers are taking care of them. They're going to the smaller places where the people are crossing on the foot. And they were taking those who are either really exhausted or those who wanted to come. And I think it's like playing poker. I think all those people were winners, because they are in the great place, like they're spending vacation now. So so that's a really nice story, but the story about human life. If you take a risk sometimes in your life, then your life can turn either good or bad. So but we like to know those good stories. So here it is, that's even better stories, because they were the first who wanted to go, and she wanted the kids to really be back in the training. So what happened, they have a friends in Krakow, and they just happen to have the apartment, because whoever died, and so they are there now. So she works, she was a teacher, and that happened. And as I said, most of them are really high educated. So she speaks Polish and she speaks Ukrainian too. Those Ukrainian who are speaking Polish, they were born in some places where there are still pockets of Poles in Ukraine. They were going to schools and they were speaking Polish as well. So now when they're leaving, so this is a crop of the ladies who are the teachers. So she found the job. She's teaching, boys are in training. Wonderful story. So I hope all the stories will be the same. So, well, that's pretty much what I told you. But the thing is here, so their guests can only stay until May 15, because for them to really have that whole center working, it costs them like $6,000 a month to really maintain. You have the water, you have a heating, electricity, you have the sewer, you have the cook who is working there. So they normally are organizing weddings. They have also the groups, like, for example, we would be a good group to go there for the weekend. So, so they say now the deadline is May 15, but where those people can go? And my brother is like, well, I think we have to do something. And I'll tell you in a minute what his idea, as I said, he's a visionary, so he's crazy and have some crazy ideas. And again, I don't agree with it, but we shall see. So anyway, so that's a dining area. And then as you can see, that's the youngest refugee, but another is coming too, because one of the ladies is pregnant and very soon she's gonna have a baby. So, so that's another, well, so all those kids, because they have a theater and they have a facility, so they are providing the kids with kind of the activities that they feel like they are on vacation rather than they are the refugee from the country. So, so one of the things they go, they have the theater performance, and they have all those actors who came and of course donated it as a free performance. And they have the people painting the faces for all those kids. And well, as my brother said, a lot of them wants to be soldiers. Well, it's the atmosphere. They want to be the soldiers when they want to defeat the Ukraine, the Russia. And here we go. Why again? Those diplomats were without the vision to understand that the war started. You're gonna have two nations being enemy forever, because it takes later 40 years again to rebuild the trust between the. Yeah, so it's outside is a great place. So they are playing, they're doing all the badminton, scooters, because of course they have all that things prepared for the guests. So now they have a bikes, they have all that stuff. So they have, so the problem is to really find people who would be helping, because as my brother and his wife, there are only two, and she has to really arrange, the people has to go and bring the food and all that good stuff. So she's in charge, and but they have some of the mothers who are teachers are really hands-on with those kids, and they also are bringing some people. Well, they're also helping, they're cleaning, so it's still the early spring there, so they're racking the leaves and helping them, so that's good. So they have the workforce. So here we go, and I think so. Here they have a dances, and they also started doing the schoolwork and all the painting and cutting and all that stuff. So sounds to me very positive and not really bad. I wish, but the same is happening in some of those churches. The same is happening in the other schools, where they open maybe one room where the people can have the beds and sleep, and then the children will go to school there. So it's an just enormous effort of all the people in Poland. We just hope that the war will finish, and that somehow which solve on their own. Yeah, so in fact, I know the lady, she is from the village next door, and she was just training how to be hairdresser. So she's coming and doing her job. And yeah, so here we have a dentist who is working, and then we have a soldier. He is gonna be a soldier, no question. So he already made his mind. Yes, yeah, as I said, so here are those women who are very active. So 1, 2, 3, 4 is pregnant, and I think it's very soon the baby is coming, and they already arranged the hospital and already have a crib and everything. So It's so what it is, most of these mothers are in the good psychological stage, but some of them are really depressed. They're sitting in their rooms and they don't know what they're gonna do. They don't know what they're gonna do in the future. They don't know when they're gonna go back home, and they don't really know how they can make in this new country. And also, what are they gonna do if they have to leave the place and look for the other place to stay? So those who are active, who are really strong, they are helping in the kitchen, but also they decided, and here my brother wife help, they are cooking pierogi, and then they are cooking crepes, and every day in the morning they're delivering them to Warsaw. It's only half an hour drive from Warsaw, so it's not, and if they have contact. But from what I've heard and what I read on the news, a lot of women are selling pierogi. So it seems like Poland now has a national food. It's gonna be pierogi. Well, it's in Polish. We're wishing those kids good thoughts for today and for tomorrow. And since my talk is not very dramatic, we're hoping very soon we're gonna see those two on one of those border crossing. Well, that's a nice wish, but we don't know. Yeah, so my brother and since there was a lot of people who donated the money from Polish community and also from Eva friend and so forth. So they send that letter that they say, of course, what they're doing would not be possible without all our help, which we're providing and giving them. And I just thank you for your attention. And if anybody wants to donate, or you know somebody who wants to donate, here's the information. And Eva said PayPal was working the best for any money. And in fact, yes, the one morning my brother is calling, and it's like, Hannah, terrible. We don't have internet. The internet is so slow because everybody's talking. The girls want to talk to their husband, somebody, I don't know. So I'm like, what do you want me to do? So his name is Sławomir, Sławek, very Slavic name. I said, well, just order me one of those antennas so we can connect to the Musk satellites. I'm like, okay, so where should I go? And so of course, so go to Starlink, order, tell them it has to be here in 2 weeks. I said, they don't have telephone. It's nothing I can do. I can pay, and I can tell they're really delivering in Europe from Ireland. So I sent them the email, and I thought, well, it's going to end up in some black hole, but it didn't. In the next 2 weeks, they have it. My brother's going, do you know what it is? 10 times better than I ever had, even if nobody was here. So yeah, so we're using the money. So yeah, so that's pretty much the end of my talk, but the rest could be for the question. And I would like to introduce Maria, my friend, who really moved from Ukraine. And so now for the second time is a huge exodus, which we have after World War II, where the red light, so the people living in the Ukraine, which before the World War II was Polish, were moving to West part, which before was German. And then the Germans were moving the blue lines back to the Germany. So all that has been done thanks to the Stalin idea and of course Jalta conference. And I really like that map because it's showing that the Poland before World War II, that doesn't work, but the yellow line is where the border was. So you can see that the Lvov, it's here. So the Lvov was really within the borders. And you were born just above the woods on the right side where the Ruvna was. So there's all those people. So it's not unfamiliar because that's what the Russians were doing. It's called ethnical cleansing, moving millions of people from whatever Ukraine or Crimea to Kazakhstan, moving Polish from Ukraine to the western part of the border. So now, 77 years after war, suddenly things are the same. So again, who did it? I think we're the diplomats. We don't have a good diplomats. Thank you. Well, I would be happy to answer the questions.
Great.
Well, what I do.
Thank you very much for that kind of firsthand look into what is happening in the Polish diaspora from receiving all the people from Ukraine. There was a letter in the, I don't know, I think yesterday or the day before, about someone who made reservations for Airbnb in Poland, just saying, okay, we aren't coming, but here we're giving you some money. Was that related to this or not?
No. Nothing.
But I think we all are interested in helping. And any way that vehicle that can do that, we'd be happy to find out about. So we'll get that address
Okay.
that you had on the slide and pass that around. So now it is first, we're an all volunteer organization. We depend on the generosity of our friends for support. So we'll pass the baskets and then start our question and answer period. You'd raise your hand, please ask one question at a time, a brief question, and we will try and get to everyone once before coming back for a second question. So anyone? Oh, okay. Did you want to speak?
To chodź, tu, Maryś. Nie dawaj. Tak. Yeah, yeah. Chodź tu, Marysieńka. No. Yes, I just wanted to introduce my friend Maria. So she was born in that close northern part of the Lviv, and she was 10 months old when her mom brought her to United States to
Poland.
to Poland together with
Poland.
it was
Poland.
that's right, together with her brother, and then well, and they make Poland their place.
My mom and all family. My mom and all family. My brother was 2 years old, and I was a couple months, and we ran from there from Rovne, which my mom says next day supposed to be
Level.
and
it happened. So
and it was happened really. It was last minute when they left this place.
well, because the Russian army was coming and they were coming to liberate all of us, but in
Yeah.
the meantime they didn't like Ukrainians, and the Polish, who knows who likes whom when the war is. That's what I said. When the war comes.
Yeah. Well, I really don't have.
Yeah, but then
didn't
she spent a
understand.
couple of years in Poland and then left in 1971
71. Yeah.
with
Mhm.
her husband for Austria, and then
to
end up.
Vienna, and from Vienna we come to United States, to Chicago, and from Chicago after 5 years we live in Chicago 5 years, and after Chicago we come to Raleigh, and in 1978, and since that time I live in Raleigh.
No, but I think it's important that you, as a refugee or whatever, you come to another country, and her husband, who is a little older, and he survived
It's a lot older.
okay, so he survived the Warsaw Uprising in 1944 as a little boy. So he saw so it's really touching. Every time he tells this, I can almost not listen to it. He says he was 9 years old when the Warsaw Uprising in 1944 started. So he was looking through the window and he saw, like, the Germans tell all the people from that particular apartment building to go outside, and they're shooting.
And
There
they're
was,
shooting all of them.
and
yeah.
then one of them ran away, and there is a boy, and there was apparently, it was Warsaw, but on a little outskirts. So there was the field of the potatoes, because the uprising started in September, no, with August 1st. So it was
August,
September.
yeah.
It was September 13 or something when they have that Wola thing. And so he said they got that guy back. So he was wounded, but he was still alive. And so
Yeah, it was very.
so
very
so
hard time.
anyway, he wanted to go back to Poland. So in 19 what?
No, 2000. In 2000, he come.
Yeah, well,
be retired.
yeah. So after he retired, he decided he wants to go back to Poland. So he went, he arranged for apartment, and it was already after Solidarity movement, new government, the Poland was free. So they went for
But
seven.
it was, excuse me, it was after 28 years when we live in Raleigh, in America, and when we come to Warsaw, it was really different. You know, it was absolutely different. We just couldn't adapt over there again. And after a couple of years, we just, after 2 years, we come to Raleigh, just visit Hannah because she was our best friend. And we decide, well, probably we have to come back to Poland because, you know, we feel over here, really feel and we very like it, and temperature and people and everything. After 28 years, you know, in another country, you just, it's very difficult to, you know,
To
live
adapt back.
adapt again, yeah. And I'm
Something.
glad that I am here with you. Thank you.
Thank you. It's very nice. Very nice to hear from you. Now, questions from the audience? I saw Fred first.
I noticed that on the map, there's a substantial border with Belarus also. And at one time was also part of Poland. Now that that country is sort of, I
Ally.
think, how is that working out for refugees and people in Poland along that border?
Doesn't work very well, and it wasn't working very well in the winter when the people from Syria and I think some of the Afghanistan were really sent on the planes through, of course, Belarusian embassy, and they were sent to Belarus, and then they were put on that border, and they were supposed to cross and come to Poland. And Poland really strongly opposed that idea because this was the political movement, probably run by the Lukashenko, but it could be also on advice of Putin.
Yeah, a lot of these population migrations were after border changes, World War I, World War II, because World War II, they kicked the Germans out on the west and the Ukrainians kicked the Poles out on the east. And my dad said it was really brutal. They would have like 24 hours to leave your home. And that was
Sometimes
very-
less.
Pardon?
Sometimes less.
Or less. Yeah, or it was very brutal.
Yeah.
And
well,
Stalin's what's wanted. What I'm saying, but in this case, when like Putin is now sort of withdrawing his claims on Kiev and the northern Ukraine. When can people start coming back now? Do you expect?
Well, you see, that's a question, and that's the same question I asked my brother, and he said, well, you see, I think I'm gonna build the village, and that's his crazy idea. In the back of the farm, there's still a very big field, and there is Dutch company which has the tiny houses which are built from the elements. And I think that's what he wants to do. So he really doesn't want all those people to leave. He said he can even bring more. That's his idea. His wife really opposes this. I'm not saying anything because I know his idea are always working. So maybe that's a good idea. I don't know. So it seems like another country in Europe are contributing and wanted to do something too.
More questions? We got Marge.
Thank you for coming and telling us your story and helping us understand what's going on over there. Your story reminds me of my parents' story. My father was an American businessman in Germany, met my mother, had 3 children, but when they came back to America, they had to leave or my father would have been put in prison. They came, my brother was 10 and my sister was 7. And I found it most interesting that neither one of them ever had any desire to go back to Germany. Neither one of them had an accent. It's like they just erase the whole thing. I know that they went through the Blitzkrieg, you know, and I'm sure that was traumatizing and hard for them as children. But
Yeah, well,
yeah.
I've heard many stories like yours being in Missouri because it has a very big German population.
Oh, really?
So some of them were prisoners of war there, and
Yeah.
then after whatever that they should stay there, but they never wanted to go back.
No.
So they married, they stay, and they're very professional. And well, they were not happy with Hitler either. So we know. So that's when the war starts, there's no ending for it. So that's the biggest problem. And
From what I understand, Poland has some very anti LGBT laws. Do you know if any is the United States or any other government pressing them for the refugees that are gay that are marching in?
well, I think according to what the government says now, it's a very right-wing oriented government in Poland now, but it seems like they are slowly coming to the conclusion that they have to do something and help the people who are really have that in their hands, because it seems like the people of Poland are the one who are doing it. So of course they're now coming, and that's, I have another one. Some of that right wing are accusing Poland that they forgot what happened between the Polish and Ukrainian in year during the war. But yeah, that part is really done by the Russians and by the Stalin. So he really, but what I said, that region have seen one of the worst, probably even worse than in that poem, cruelty and the human tragedy than anywhere in the world. And so that's another thing. Why are we doing it again? So yeah, to answer your question, no, I think the Polish and my generation understand that this is really the history. A lot of things had happened after World War I, and what happened then, the Poles won the war with the Bolsheviks in 1920, and then they signed the treaty in Riga, right, whatever. So, and after that treaty, part of the Ukraine was given to Poland, but then part was given to Russia. And then the Ukrainians didn't like that idea. And even the guy who was in charge, General Piłsudski in Poland, didn't like that idea. So what happened later, it's always, you can explain in the terms of the history. So I know my generation, and I know the young, like my son generation, which those are 30, 40 years. So those are in the age of those ladies coming. We just don't want to think about it, what happened 120 years ago. We want to live a new life. And that's what those Ukrainians are welcome to Poland.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for your talk. I thought it was really quite interesting. But I also wanted to mention, I have got a woman I used to work with who's several years younger than me, and she lived in Eastern Poland. That's where she grew up when she was a child. And she remembered at the age of 7, her aunt came running into her grandmother's kitchen. The Russians are coming, the Russians are coming. And so the whole family immigrated to the United States, her parents, herself, and her 3 younger sisters. And they lived in the US for 2 years. But her mom got really, really homesick, and they went back to Poland. And then her mom realized that her dad stayed in the US because he was working. Her mom realized she'd made a tremendous mistake. But it took her 4 more years to get back out of Poland. And I think that
it's the question what year it was.
Early-ish middle 80s at that point.
Yeah, so that's maybe before the martial law.
Yeah, but it was a tough thing. And the interesting thing to me is that Aggie ended up, of course, staying in this country and joining the military and eventually getting American citizenship. And she's, married with 2 kids, and neither of whom speaks much Polish because they were a little bit resistant to the idea because children are stubborn. But I think that one of the reasons I found your talk interesting was because you've had experience having to leave somewhere. So you have a stronger feeling for what a lot of these people might be going through than most of us in here.
Yeah, you see, in 1980, well, in fact, I got the PhD in 1980, and right away, I got the stipend in University of Columbia in New York, and I thought, oh, that's a great place to go. I would love to go, but they didn't let my husband to leave, and my son was only, 4 months or 5 months old, and I know when I was passing exam to be in the PhD program, the lady who was examining me said, look, never ever, oh, you're a American, she said, you have to go to America for your first stipend. But then she said, please, never ever leave your son, because I left my son for a year, then I got extension, so I was away for 2 years. I got back and my son never ever recognized me. So it took me 4 years to be able to leave. So although I have an offer in 1980, I didn't leave until 1984, when it was almost the end of the martial law.
Thank you for your talk. Do you feel that what the refugees that are experiencing from Ukraine will impact the refugee experience throughout the world? Do you feel like the way that they've been treated will somehow impact how everyone's treated going forward?
Yes, I think so. I think it's a really good example of the 4 million people leaving the country and being distributed around Europe and also United States, that certainly is gonna bring impact on the rest of the countries and the rest of the people.
Yeah, on the news last night, they showed people lining up at embassies for visas to the US. And I think there were 2 different visas, one visitor's visa, which meant that they could only stay a certain time, had to go back, and the other were for people that had relatives in the United States, but it was going to be months before people who, I think they're applying to get a appointment, some of them. And so it may be months before they get the appointment to go in and get the visa.
Well, it has never been easy with the papers. Yeah.
So Jan's question made me think more about the refugees that are in Poland right now, the Ukrainians there. Will they have opportunity for longer term staying, for applying for work and having a future?
Yes, yes. As I said, they just got the Polish social security number. That means that
Right.
they have a permit to work, and
Okay.
well, now government is trying to also help and organize the schools and somehow to admit the children, because that's a problem.
Will that be a temporary work permit? Or is
No,
that-
I think Marisha, for 4 years. What did they say? I don't remember. I think it says for 3 or 4 years.
Oh, 3 or 4 years.
Yes, so
okay.
it's just in the terms of years. I think I don't remember 3 or 4 years, but something. So yeah, I said 40 zloty a day, but that's question for how long as they have the refugee status. But the minute they're gonna get the status of the person who can work, they're not gonna get that, and certainly who hosts them is not gonna get that money either.
So one thing I found very ironic was that the dissidents leaving Russia or people leaving Russia can't come to the United States as for asylum from the Russian government because they're displaced by Ukrainians. I just found that very ironic, but it's not like they don't have anywhere else to go, like many Ukrainians. The thing I guess I'm curious about is the rebuilding of Ukraine is going to be just massive.
Well, yeah, but the question is, We still don't know what's going to happen with the eastern part of Ukraine. Somehow, one of the slides where I have the amount of people living on the eastern Ukraine speaking Russian. So that part, it really has more people speaking Russian than really Ukrainian. So as you talk about those being displaced, so according to Putin, that's what he wanted them to feel like they're in Russia. So that's what he wants to take that part of Russia. But it's again, work for diplomats. Why don't you go? You can have there's a lot of tools when you can really solve the problem like that.
So I did also hear, sorry, Jane, that some of the Russian-speaking, some of the population in Russian-speaking Eastern Ukraine still want to speak Russian, but they want the freedoms of Ukraine. They don't want to be in Russia.
Yeah. So well, the people are people. So it's like the governments, left-handed and right-handed. So what can we do?
Yeah, in terms of people going back to Ukraine, there has been so much destruction that is there even a place for them to go? I mean, it's a huge rebuilding process. You'd need a Marshall Plan probably to do any significant rebuilding, but there's no jobs, no shops.
Well,
no homes
I
in some
talked
of
to
those
Eva. In
areas.
fact, when she was in Washington, D.C., she met one of the friend of her husband, and he's a journalist, and he just got back from Lviv, and he said, well, in Lviv, they're really going to school, going to work, and it's just their population grow because they have a 50% more, because before people go to Poland, they're staying really in Lviv. So, but it seems like pretending that nothing had happened. So the Western, so still that sharp division between the West and the East.
Yeah, well, I think what Putin wants mostly is to get his land bridge to Crimea. He talks about that a lot. And if that is incorporated into Russia, the Ukrainians, they're simply not going to go back. That's a real border change. So they're going to stay in Poland. They're going to go back to other place in Ukraine. What do you think? Would you rather be in Poland or in Ukraine?
The Western Ukraine, yeah. But nobody wants to go to Eastern, yeah. So that's where everything is almost level now by this bombing every day. So that's rebuilding, although Putin is not going to be in power 20 years from now, so who cares? So he doesn't care.
He's going to be Putin the Great is what he wants to be.
Yeah. Well, you never know, because a lot well, I think as Amy said, a lot of Russians are living now, and they're living like 50,000-70,000 a day. Those are mostly IT people working for the Western companies in Russia. So I don't know where they're going, but they are leaving the country. And so the Russia is not going to have the resources to be a modern country as they were before the war. There's no most of the well, pretty much all the free newspapers has been shut down. So there's no, and there's the what's the name? I forgot the whatever. There's the, like, the society here was a society which most of the members were Polish, and they were really fighting for the history of those deported to Siberia, those deported or those sent to the lagers and to the camps. And it happened that one of those guys really very much involved in it was the friend who was studying with me physics for 2 years before he really moved to, he was Russian. His father was architect rebuilding Warsaw. And he went back to Russia and graduated there and was the astronomer, has a PhD in astronomy. And he was part of that. So they put him in jail 2 weeks ago, but he's free and well, awaiting the court. So who knows what's going to happen? But the guy who's in charge, he was second in the line. So the guy who is in charge has said they're not existing anymore.
Well, are we, any last questions? Thank you so much, Hannah, for
Thank you.
your talk.
My pleasure.
Gives us a little view into what is going on, and it's very appreciated.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
And now is the time for announcements. Do we have information? Oh, for next week, I guess it's a talk on the AEU, which I'll be giving with input from Dorothy and Chris and whoever else has some information. It's are we Zooming or not? Because a third is a Zoom. Okay, but the third is also so. Okay, I'll let you talk about that.
Just so both our audiences know, I get to talk into this lovely mic. So next Sunday is the second Sunday, and all of our second Sundays will remain full Zoom and only Zoom, no in-person on any of the second Sundays. This month in April, that's the only Zoom, fully Zoom Sunday. May and June are both a little weird just because we have scheduling conflicts with another group. So May and June, second and third Sundays will be Zoom only, but we will remind you, so don't worry too hard. So next Sunday, do not come here.
Okay. Ben?
So I've kind of dropped the ball on change for change, and I apologize for that because it should have shifted out today for the next quarter. But I failed to have my act together. So it'll shift out next week. So this will be the last Sunday for Rise Against Hunger, which that jar's been there for 2 years, I guess. So, but anyway, if you have a small change or small bills that you'd like to add to that, I'll be taking it out at the end of today to switch it out. And I don't know who we're collecting for next time. I need to. Oh, maybe. Yeah, maybe.
Okay, thank you.
Since some people may have a question about how to make a direct donation to Hannah's brother's farm, I can send that out on our listserv. I did a donation by PayPal, and it's really easy when you have the right address. So I will send that out to everybody.
I wanted to announce that one of our own, Vera Hars, is in Duke University Hospital, and she would love to have visitors. She's going to be there, probably leaving there sometime early in the week. So if you go, you might call and ask if she's still there. She's going to rehab. She had some surgery on her back and was in a bit of pain, a lot of pain, and really enjoyed having visitors to keep her distracted from that. So if you're available and have the time, please consider that. And I think she would appreciate it.
Thank you, Fred, for that reminder. Any other announcements? Now if we can have closing words from Dorothy.
So one of the pleasant surprises about this presentation was how positive it was. And so I feel a little sheepish about that poem now, but that was a really, really the other side of humanity, right? There's the evil side and then there's also the good side. So that was terrific. I'm going to close just by naming some people who have been, who we know, celebrities, so to speak, who are refugees, were refugees. And we all know all the World War II ones, you know, Albert Einstein and Henry Kissinger and all those guys. So I tried to keep this a little light and a little bit younger, but I did include Madeleine Albright because she's recently passed, and I think she was just a wonderful person of that generation. But some other refugees, the supermodel Iman, I think her time, I'm not even sure I'm saying her name correctly, but I think she was a Somalian refugee. Freddie Mercury, who knew? Sergey Brin, the co-founder of Google, now Alphabet. Nadia Comaneci, Gloria Estefan, the rapper I've never heard of, MIA, in case any of you, Sri Lankan, I think, refugee. Mikhail Baryshnikov, the dancer, and Mila Kunis, currently an actress. So anyway, there's lots of people who have come here to this country in particular and brought lots and lots of talent. Ava Harrington, yes, yes. I also have two closing quotes that are a little bit brighter than what I read before. And these are both from Afghani refugees. The first is from Khalid Hosseini, who wrote The Kite Runner and several other really great books. And he says, refugees are mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, children with the same hopes and ambitions as us, except that a twist of fate has bound their lives to a global refugee crisis on an unprecedented scale. And the next is from an author named Nadia Hashimi, who is the daughter of Afghan immigrants and a novelist. And her quote is, refugees didn't just escape a place, they had to escape 1,000 memories until they'd put enough time and distance between them and their misery to wake to a better day.
Thank you, Dorothy. I want to thank all our volunteers for today, Dorothy, for those opening and closing words, Mary Lockhart, who is our greeter, and Atish and Christina for what it looks like a delicious spread of refreshment. And our meeting's over, but our fellowship continues. Please join us for refreshments and give a warm greeting to the person sitting next to you with a smile or an elbow bump or whatever you're doing these days.